The city of Gotham had always been a city of shadows, of corruption buried beneath flickering neon and rain-slicked rooftops. Crime, violence, and fear were its natural order, and yet Batman had always thrived in the darkness. But this time, darkness came in a new, insidious form. The streets were no longer filled with gangsters, thugs, and organized crime. They were crawling with the infected, the living dead, a plague that had erupted overnight. It started subtly, whispers of a virus, a sickness that turned ordinary people into monsters of rage and hunger. Then it spread with a speed that terrified even Batman. One night, the bat signal pierced the clouds, but Commissioner Gordon's frantic voice over the comms was all but incomprehensible through the screams echoing from the streets. "Bruce, it's everywhere. The city, it's gone." Batman didn't hesitate. Gotham didn't wait for miracles. It demanded them. He suited up in the Batcave, every gadget calibrated for survival in chaos. Grapnel guns, smoke pellets, EMP devices, tools of stealth, tools of combat. But even these felt pale against a tide of undead. The virus didn't care about intimidation, fear, or justice. It was relentless, adaptive, and everywhere. His first mission was reconnaissance. The streets were eerily silent, punctuated by guttural moans and the splatter of desperate feet on wet asphalt. From the rooftop, Batman scanned the city, noting pockets of survivors clinging to life in fortified buildings. Each encounter was brutal. The infected moved unpredictably, driven by primal hunger. One bite, one scratch, and even the strongest could become one of them. He had to adapt. He descended into the alleyways, silent as a shadow, observing a group of survivors barricaded inside a small convenience store. He could see the fear etched on their faces. Young couples, children, a man clutching a shotgun like it was a lifeline. Their eyes widened when they spotted him, expecting either salvation or death. Who's there?" a woman stammered. "Batman," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "I'm here to help you survive." The relief was immediate, but short-lived. A scream erupted from the street behind him. He turned, and a horde of infected burst through the night, driven by an unnatural frenzy. Batman assessed quickly. Speed, numbers, lethality. He activated a sonic device on his belt, disorienting the front of the horde, giving the survivors a chance to retreat. This was no ordinary city siege. It was survival on an unprecedented scale. And Batman quickly realized that his usual methods, stealth, fear, intimidation, were only marginally effective. The zombies of this new Gotham didn't feel fear. They felt only hunger. He moved to the rooftop again, observing the city through the lens of his binoculars. Downtown was engulfed. Cars abandoned mid-street. Fires burning in skyscraper offices, and the silhouettes of the infected shuffling in mass formation. It was like watching the collapse of an entire world through a broken lens. Batman's mind raced through possible solutions. He considered quarantine zones, evacuation points, and fortified safe houses. But the virus was fast, adaptive. Every plan needed contingencies, and even then, survival was uncertain. His instincts told him the key to Gotham's survival, and his own, was not just fighting the infected, but outlasting them. He needed a strategy as relentless as they were. He descended into the subway system, a labyrinth of tunnels that could serve as both refuge and death trap. The darkness was nearly absolute, broken only by the occasional flicker of emergency lights. Here, the infected were slower but more numerous. crammed in confined spaces. Batman moved with precision, taking them down quietly when possible, using smoke and agility to avoid being surrounded. Hours, or maybe days, passed in the subterranean war. Time had lost meaning. Hunger gnawed at him. Exhaustion pressed at his mind, but his focus never wavered. Every shadow, every sound could mean death. And yet, he discovered something invaluable: knowledge of the infected's behavior. They reacted to sound, movement, and light, but they also formed strange patterns, almost hive-like, driven by the collective instinct to hunt. Understanding this allowed Batman to predict their movements, setting traps that could turn the tide in critical moments. One encounter, however, shook him more than the rest. He found a survivor, a young man named Elias, trapped in a maintenance tunnel. Elias had been separated from a group of friends and had survived by hiding in the shadows, mimicking the movements of the infected. Batman recognized the signs immediately. Hypervigilance, resourcefulness, and fear hardened into something like instinct. "You can't survive alone down here," Batman said, helping him to his feet. I know," Elias said, trembling. I just can't trust anyone. Not anymore." "Trust is a luxury," Batman replied, "but survival isn't. Follow my lead." Together, they moved through the underground maze, avoiding hordes, securing supplies from abandoned stores, and fortifying access points. Batman taught Elias what he had learned about the infected: the patterns, the vulnerabilities, the methods of avoidance. In turn, Elias offered something Batman hadn't expected: hope. It was a fragile thing, almost laughable against the backdrop of despair, but it reminded him why he fought at all. Survival wasn't just about living. It was about preserving what humanity remained. As days turned into weeks, Batman's methods evolved. He became a ghost in the city, striking swiftly, vanishing before the infected could respond. He scavenged weapons and tools, modified vehicles for stealthy movement, and created safe zones for survivors to gather. He even developed rudimentary communication networks, tapping into abandoned radios and signals to coordinate small, mobile groups of survivors. But there was one problem that gnawed at him constantly: the infected were mutating. He noticed subtle changes: a swifter zombie, a more aggressive horde, patterns that defied his earlier predictions. It was no longer just survival. It was adaptation versus evolution. And evolution had a terrifying edge. The first major confrontation came when he attempted to secure the Gotham General Hospital. Reports indicated it housed the last stockpile of medical supplies capable of combating the infection: temporary antidotes, sedatives, and experimental treatments. The hospital, however, had become a fortress of the infected. Hundreds of them filled the lobby, stairwells, and corridors, their groans echoing like a symphony of despair. Batman assessed the situation from the rooftop across the street. A direct assault was suicide. He needed to divide them, isolate pockets, and strike with precision, using explosives strategically. He collapsed stairwells and redirected hordes into confined spaces. Smoke and mirrors, literally, allowed him to slip through corridors undetected, systematically clearing the path for Elias and other survivors to access the medical supplies. But victory came at a cost. Batman sustained injuries, deep gashes from close encounters, exhaustion that clouded his judgment. But he pressed on. He realized that to truly outlast the apocalypse, he couldn't just rely on gadgets and combat prowess. He needed information, a broader understanding of infection. He traced the outbreak to a pharmaceutical research facility on the outskirts of Gotham. There, he discovered the horrifying truth. A virus engineered as a bioweapon had escaped containment. The infected were the first wave, and the mutation was accelerating due to exposure to urban pollutants and human host factors. It was a living organism, learning, evolving, and it had no morality, no limits. Batman devised a plan, audacious in its scale. He would infiltrate the facility, secure any remaining data, and develop a containment protocol, even if it meant sacrificing parts of the city to save the rest. With Elias and a small team of survivors, he navigated the perimeter, avoiding patrols of infected that now showed signs of intelligence. Coordinated attacks, rudimentary strategy, hunting in organized packs. Inside the facility, the team faced horrors that tested every ounce of skill and resolve. Security systems triggered traps, and mutated infected displayed terrifying abilities, heightened speed, bursts of strength, and an almost preternatural sense of human presence. Yet Batman's strategy, honed over weeks of relentless exposure to the undead, allowed them to survive, though not without injuries and losses. The climax came when Batman confronted what could only be described as a hive mind, a massive, central infected organism that coordinated the horde. It was grotesque, a shifting mass of bodies fused together by infection, pulsating with hunger. Batman engaged not with brute force alone, but with strategy, setting traps, isolating parts of the organism, and ultimately using an EMP device to disrupt its neural coordination. The horde faltered, chaos replacing coordination, allowing survivors to escape and the city to begin a tentative recovery. In the aftermath, Gotham was scarred, broken, but not extinct. Survivors emerged from hiding, and small communities began rebuilding. Batman, ever the shadow, retreated into the darkness once more. He had outlasted the apocalypse, but he knew the city had changed forever. Humanity's resilience had been tested, and in its shadow, he remained vigilant. The virus might return. Evolution would continue, and he would be ready. As dawn broke over the ruined skyline, Batman stood atop Wayne Tower, looking over a city that survived against impossible odds. The streets were quiet, the fires smoldering, but life persisted. He knew this wasn't the end. It never was. But for now, Gotham had a chance. And that, in the end, was what mattered most.